what you focus on grows. So if you're focusing on those self-doubts, they're just going to grow. And the other thing that I know for sure is you don't have to believe your thoughts. That was a big one for me to really get that lesson. Welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast. I'm Jo Clark and I'm so glad you're here. And this is a podcast for women who are ready to break free from outdated stereotypes, rediscover themselves, and embrace the endless opportunities that midlife brings. Each week, I'll share expert advice, actionable strategies, and inspiring conversations with incredible women who are redefining what it means to thrive in midlife and beyond. From health and wellness to reigniting your purpose and passions, this is your go-to podcast for feeling empowered, supported, and seen. And midlife isn't the end. It's your time to shine, rewrite your story, and create a life that you truly love. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to episode 126. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate the time that you're taking out of your day when you've probably got a million things to do to listen to this episode. Before I forget, I just want to remind you to listen when you've got the time as well, if you haven't already, to last week's episode with Professor Susan Davis. Now, I've had lots of great feedback from listeners and they loved hearing all of the up-to-date research that Professor Davis shared with us. So if you're a woman who's interested in looking after her health in the middle of life, which I hope you are, and you want to learn more about how you can live well now and a little bit more about, or a lot more about hormones, then that's an episode I really encourage you to listen to. And we've got so many great episodes that are also coming up. So follow along on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. And if you feel inclined, I'd love you to leave a review and a rating because it is one of the best ways that helps other women to find this show. And it basically means that they can get to hear the great information and the conversations that we've got on the episodes. And the more reviews you have, the more it suggests a podcast to other people. And if you can think of someone who you know would benefit from listening, then post about the show on your favorite social media app or text your friend or email the link to a friend. So now on to today's episode. This solo episode is going to be a little bit different. And it actually came about after I asked my community on an Instagram story a couple of weeks ago what they would like to know or ask me. And I mentioned that depending on how many responded, that I'd create an episode using these questions. Well, let's just say I've got more than enough questions for a number of episodes, but today I'm just going to answer 5 of these questions and I'll come back to the other ones in future episodes. Now, one thing I know is that although every woman's experience in midlife is unique, there are so many things that we've all got in common. And that's why talking openly and having these sorts of questions and me answering them is really helpful, because you won't feel so alone. Even though you might be going through something and you're quite sure that nobody else is, rest assured you aren't alone. And so the first question comes from Julie, and she asks, how do you relax and manage stress? And this is a super important one because, to be honest, this time of life, although it's absolutely fabulous, there can be a lot of stresses that happen in your life. And they're very different to the stresses that you might have had in your 20s and 30s. And they can be stresses from everything from a lack of sleep to the changes in your hormones, to perhaps not eating as well as what you should be, from career stresses, relationship stresses. Maybe you've got a health crisis. The sky's the limit as to what sort of stresses that you might have in your life and what causes them. So I really like that Julie asked how I actually prefer to relax and manage my stress, because what I know from working with lots of women is that there are lots of things out there that can help. You've got to find what resonates with you. So I'm going to be talking from my own personal experience and what I find works well for me. And you find what's going to work well for you, because we're all so different and we've all got our preferences. So you find what works well for you, and maybe you can pick up an idea or two that I share here. Firstly, we know that if at this stage of life, if we don't get on top of managing our stresses, then it's going to have a fairly big flow-on effect with a number of chronic diseases that can appear at this stage in life. And we know from listening to all of the various health experts that we've had on the show that chronic diseases don't happen overnight. They're an accumulation of lots of different things that happen over the number of years or even decades. So getting on top of it is really important to do. And also, it's important that it becomes a daily practice, that you don't do it every now and then. You don't do it when you're at your most stressed. You actually try to find pockets of time every day to have one or two or three or however many different techniques you like to add to try to reduce and manage the stresses. Because it's like putting a band-aid onto something. If you only do it once in a while, it's really much better to be making sure that you keep things at a lowest level of stress as you can. And it does happen, when the poo hits a fan, if you're at always or most normally at a lower level of stress, it helps you then to be able to cope with some of those big hits that might come your way. So you create the time is one of the things that I do for myself. I create time in my day in order to manage my stress, and also times to relax. I make sure that that is factored into my days, factored into my weeks. For me, I absolutely have some go-to practices. Number one, my very first one, and we'll talk a bit more about it in another question, is that I meditate, and I meditate twice a day. So I make time for that. I love to move my body. So every day I do something where I'm moving my body, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's yoga, whether it's my exercise program from my physiotherapist, whether it's jumping in the pool, whether it's gardening. So some things I organize and plan for, other things might happen incidentally, like gardening. I love also spending time in nature, pottering around the garden or going for a walk outdoors. I really do love that. I love being at the beach. I find that incredibly, incredibly calming for me. Anywhere near water, actually. Even sitting by a dam, I find incredibly restful and relaxing. Journaling is something that I don't do every day, but I do it a few times a week. I do enjoy journaling and get all of those thoughts down. I find that helps me to manage my stress. I also love reading. For me, reading is something that I like to spend some time doing, and I might find pockets of time during the day to be able to read. So it's finding your own recipe, finding what resonates with you. So as I said, my non-negotiable will be meditation. If I can't fit anything else in the day, then I know meditation, I've at least done that. And then try to, if I can, find at least one or more of those other things that I did mention. So you work out what it could be for you. It could be a 5-minute meditation. It could be journaling. Perhaps it's just some breath work, simple breath work, which I failed to mention. I do love doing breath work as well, and I usually incorporate that into my yoga practice or when I'm doing my physio exercises as well. They're just little ways, little pockets of things that you can add to your toolkit. So if you think of it like a toolkit, it might help. Now, this next question comes from Jessica, and she asks, what advice do you have for someone who's feeling lost at this stage of life? Well, this is one of my favorite topics, actually. It's exactly what I do when I work with women in my mentoring spaces. And what I know, Jessica, is that no two women are ever going to be the same, because we're all at different ages and stages of life, different life experiences. We've got different dreams, and we've got different life circumstances. But like I said at the start of the show, we've still got those commonalities. There are going to be certain things that we as women will go through that we'll have in common. So because we've got that commonality, what you will actually find is that feeling lost is actually normal. It feels like it's not, but it actually is, because it's a sign of growth, a sign of saying, well, something's not quite right. What can I do here? How can I make my way through it? And through every time that we go through something difficult, we grow in a certain way, and it teaches us something new. So see it as a sign of growth. Don't see it as something that's going to be all doom and gloom. You are going to find some pockets of absolutely miraculous things that can happen when you get through it, not when you're going through the thick of it, but in hindsight, there's so much growth that can happen. And also think about self-reflection. When you're feeling lost, it's those times of who are you beyond all of your roles and responsibilities. So take some time for yourself to really have some self-reflection and think about what's going on in your life, what you want, what you don't want. They're all the sorts of key things that can be really helpful if you're feeling a little bit lost. And also know the power of those small steps that you can take, because we don't have to know at all times and have it all figured out. And it's not going to happen instantaneously. Change happens over time. And so taking a small step can really be very helpful. We don't have to have one gigantic leap and it's all going to be fixed. Just think of things and taking one small step in a direction. And it may not be the right direction. That's okay. What you find is that, through life, and I'm sure you've experienced it as well, that, you go down one path and it's not the path that you thought. It's okay if that path is not for you. Turn around and find another one. That's the joy and the beauty of life, I suppose, is that, you don't know what's ahead, and you can only learn on what you've got or what has happened in the past. And as we get older, we gain so much wisdom. So yeah, use the wisdom that you've accrued so far and all the years that you've led in your life so far. And I was actually, when I was thinking about this question, was a DM that I had with a lovely lady in my Instagram community the other day. And this was actually her to a T. She was feeling lost. And this is a bit of some of the things that I shared with her. And it was what I just shared a minute ago, is that you're not alone. And it is a fairly tricky time, that there's no doubting that. And it can feel really hard. And there is rarely a clear and easy path from one thing to another. But if you follow those breadcrumbs, it can really help. So a tip that I can give everyone, and I also gave to her, was put your thoughts down on that paper, because quite often we've got lots of random thoughts that just swirl around our head. But when you write it down and you can see it on paper, it can really help to clarify things for you. And then over those next few weeks, when you start to feel that, feeling of being lost, just spend some time reflecting and journaling. Give yourself that time and that space, because you're going to be really surprised what happens when you do start putting your thoughts on paper. So things like, put your thoughts down on what you like and what you don't like about whatever might be going on, what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And then start to explore that a little bit further. And these are the questions that we probably never ask of ourselves. Ask yourself what your dreams are. So what dreams do you have? What makes you happy? What brings you joy? Because we often get caught in the negative spiral of nothing's working for me, it feels hopeless. But there are also things, if we can start to pull apart and just put down on bits of paper what we like, what we want, what our dreams are, what fills us up with joy, what makes us happy. They're the sorts of things that can give you a bit of a guide and a bit of an idea, a structure of what your next step might be. And remember, you've got so many skills after all of these years of living, working, being. So write all of those skills down as well. That doesn't hurt. I mean, you might have a whole lot of things that you can fall back on and know that you're not at a point where you can't do anything at all. And remember, this time of life, it is an awakening. It's sort of one moment where you're realizing that there is a lot more of a life left to live. What might that look like? It can be daunting, but just know that it can be absolutely amazing as well. It is a chance for you to rewrite your story and to step into something that's going to be brand new. So if it does feel overwhelming and you can't do this alone, get some support. There is absolutely no shame in getting support. And that again can look different for different people. It might be talking about this with a partner, could be talking about it with a close friend or a family member, or it could even be someone like me who guides you through a process so you can create a plan of action that helps you move forward. So it will look different for every single person. So don't take it to heart, Jessica, that you're the only one going through it. It's something that is very, very common to every single one of us. Now, that next question comes from Shaz, and she asks, do you use guided meditations, AM or PM, and for how long? As I mentioned a little bit earlier, I do meditate twice a day. I've dabbled in meditation for a number of years, and 6 years ago, I actually learned a form of meditation called Vedic meditation. And I was taught by a Vedic meditation teacher. In fact, it was very early on, episode 4 or 5, it would have been, was when my podcast first started. I actually had an interview with my meditation teacher, and she really explains what this technique and what this style of meditation is like. So rather than me telling you about it all here now, you can go back and listen to that particular episode. But safe to say, for me, meditation has been absolutely life-changing. Everything changed for me when I learned how to meditate. And was it instant? I would say probably within the first 3 to 4 weeks, I saw a profound difference in how I felt, how I thought, and that changed the direction from what I was doing to what I'm doing now, basically. So it's 20 minutes twice a day for when you first begin. And because I had been meditating for quite some time, I've also got an advanced mantra. So that means that I can meditate up to 30 minutes twice a day. Do I fit twice a day every single day? Not every single day. I would say the vast majority of days would be 90% of days I would meditate twice. But definitely I get my morning meditation in. That is a non-negotiable for me to start my day with that. And by God, it makes a huge difference. So yeah, you can do it in all different ways. So Vedic meditation is one form of meditation, but there are lots out there. There are lots of benefits of just, even if you can't, you tell yourself you can't find 20 minutes or 30 minutes or even 10 minutes a day, just those short moments, if you can, to spend in silence. Those intentional moments of stillness are still very valuable for you as well to reduce your stresses. And guided meditations, if you find it really hard to find something something that you like, there are lots of different apps out there. I'm sure on YouTube there would be lots of different videos and things that you could watch. But the ones that I recommend to anyone who's wanting to start meditation and guided meditations. In fact, I used to teach guided meditations when I was in the classroom to the children. That was one of their very favorite times of the day, actually, is to sit and go through a guided meditation. So these are the apps that I recommend. Smiling Minds, it is an Australian-based app, this one. So you will hear an Australian voice. Lots of the other apps have got American voices or English voices, predominantly American voices. So if you find it better to listen to your native accent, then yeah, Smiling Minds is a great one, and they've got a huge range. Insight and Insight Timer, that's another great one. It's got a huge range as well. And all of these have got different length of times that you can choose to have as well. Other ones that I have heard of but I haven't used myself, Headspace and the Calm app. So there's probably heaps out there. Again, it's finding what works for you and what you enjoy. Now, the next question comes from Jeanette, and she asks, what do you do when self-doubt creeps in? This is a good one, because just like it was with the question that we had earlier on when you're feeling lost in this stage of life, same thing about self-doubt. Self-doubt will happen to you no matter what, at what stage of life you're in. It's normal. And it's completely normal when you've got lots of midlife transitions are happening. There's lots of changes, and sometimes lots of them are happening at once. So what was once normal for you has been thrown out. So that's when self-doubt does happen. You've got self-doubt what you're going to do when, there are big changes, if it's a relationship changes, or whether, you lose someone that you love, or whether you leave your career. So there's lots of that self-doubt that will creep in, Jeanette. So firstly, it's normal. And know that we're a work in progress. It's very human for us to experience self-doubt, but it becomes a choice for us then to decide if you're going to do something about it or not. And self-doubt, it still definitely happens to me. It's something that I'm definitely not immune to. But these days, I'm much, much faster at recognizing when it's creeping in. I can hear those voices in my head that are saying all of those mean, nasty things. And I've learned ways to deal with all of those negative and limiting beliefs as well. So you can reframe. One technique you can use is to reframe your limiting beliefs. So, for example, if you want to try something new, but you're telling yourself you're too old, or it's just too late, you can reframe that to you're just getting started. Have a beginner's mind with things. And what I know for sure is what you focus on grows. So if you're focusing on those self-doubts, they're just going to grow. And the other thing that I know for sure is you don't have to believe your thoughts. That was a big one for me to really get that lesson. So other ways that you might like to work through when self-doubt happens, as I said, for me, meditation is huge. That's a great way just to sit with your thoughts, and that way you can really start to think about Are they true? And, 9 times out of 10, they're just utter bullshit. So just sit with the things and question whether or not they're true. Do things actively. Get your thoughts down on paper. Really start to challenge some of those thoughts that you might have. Also, move. If you're sitting in spiraling in self-doubt, if you can get out and move your body a lot more, just a mere fact of all of those great endorphins that you get from moving your body can have a huge impact on how you're feeling. And like the earlier question that I answered, having a supportive community or a person to talk to about how you're feeling really helps, and taking small actions. So when self-doubt really starts to feed, the best way to counteract how, that whole narrative that you might have is by taking a small step and proving to yourself that it's okay. That doubt can just go once you start putting things into action and take one step after the other. The final question comes from Ella. What's one small habit that's had the biggest impact on your well-being in life? Yeah, I'll bang on it again. Meditation. And again, this is for me. It may not be for, all the listeners out there, and that's fine. Find something for you. So for me, meditation, hands down, had the biggest impact on my well-being. It gave me the ability to learn more about myself, because I was always in that busy action of doing all the time. Meditation allowed me just to be and to sit in it. And it was really, and I won't lie, it was pretty uncomfortable at first just to sit when you're used to moving and doing. But that whole act of just being with myself, being with my thoughts, also allowed me and opened up the door for my own intuition to come through. Because quite often, and I think women are very intuitive on the whole, when you're always in that whole state of busyness, you don't often allow the intuitive voice to come through. When you sit in quietness and in stillness and you're just in that state of being, that intuitive voice comes through, and you can often work your way through a lot of things. And it also, my well-being, I know my stress reduced out of sight. And because my stress reduced, I slept better. I felt better. I was a nicer person to be around. And really the other things, one small habit that has had the biggest impact, I know I said one, but this is probably the second one, is have a growth mindset. I love learning for myself. That's just me. Some people don't. But I think learning about what's important for my health at this stage of life has been absolutely critical. And that's why this podcast actually started, is so I can share some of that information with other people and have experts on in different areas of women's health and wellness. So to share that information, to learn more about how you can stay well, and then putting what you've learned into action. So the power of micro habits, and they're huge. And I've had an episode on micro habits before, that those small changes do create big results. So overall, the answer to your question, Ella, the small habit, it is a small habit that's become a daily habit, and that's meditation. And it has had a profound impact on my well-being and my health. All of my stresses have reduced significantly. So just think about something that I've spoken about today in answering one of those questions. What's one thing that you could put into action, or just to explore or to think about? So for that will be different for every single person who's listened to this episode today. And find what's going to work for you. Get help if you need it as well. You don't have to do this all by yourself. So that wraps up the questions for today. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'd love you, as I said, think about that one thing that you can take away from today's episode and apply it into your own life. And if you've got any particular question that you would like me to answer on top of the ones that I've already received, just send me a message on Instagram or email me at joe@joeclarkcoaching.com. And until next week, stay well. Thanks so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you feel inspired to make the next chapter of your life the best one yet. And remember to share this episode with someone else who would love it, and connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn at Joe Clark Coaching. All the links and the details from today's episode are in the show notes or at joeclarkcoaching.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe this show on your favourite podcast app and leave a 5-star rating and review. This helps more midlife women find these empowering conversations. I can't wait to chat with you next week. Until then, take care and keep creating a life that you love.